Hi everyone, I'm Jack Framling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share some thoughts on Memory of Fire Genesis by Eduardo Galeano. This is an astonishing book. It's an historical mosaic, so it's not quite a novel. Galeano himself, in the introduction, says this isn't an essay, it's not a history, it's not a biography, it's not a novel, but it's all of these things put together. He's sourced over 200 primary and secondary sources to create the tiles of this mosaic. This volume spans from the late 1400s through the year 1700. That's when it ends. And it is really a mosaic creating all of these individual tiles to show the experiences of what happened in South and Central America and the Caribbean, primarily. North America pops up periodically, to the native individuals who lived there when Europeans arrived. What ensued? And he very much says, I'm here to take a side. I'm here to show an experience that isn't necessarily in all of your history books, that isn't necessarily the narrative you've heard. And he does it with incredible skill and deep humanity for the people he's trying to give a voice to the voiceless. And this book works. The tiles can be short. Sometimes they're just a simple song that's a third of a page long, and it could be an Aztec song, an Inca song, a song from the Iroquois. Other times, the first 40 pages are all what he's been able to extract as the indigenous beliefs of different peoples from all across the American continents. And as an example, for the Maya, time was born and had a name when the sky didn't exist and the earth had not yet awakened. The days set out from the east and started walking. The first day produced from its entrails the sky and the earth. The second day made the stairway for the rain to run down. The cycles of the sea and the land and the multitude of things were the work of the third day. The fourth day willed the earth and the sky to tilt so that they could meet. The fifth day decided that everyone had to work. The first light emanated from the sixth day. And so we have pages to explore what was happening in these cultures before anyone from outside arrived. And then, of course, that arrival happens. And this book is absolutely extraordinary. I don't know that I've ever read anything like it. The USA Trilogy from John Dos Passos, I think, really tried to experiment with the way that literature could try and reproduce history or reproduce a single human experience. And so the newsreel sections, the camera eye sections, the biographies that make up that, along with this larger novel, traditional novel going on with interweaving characters. It is close, but this is something else. And Galeano himself, within his life, was dedicated to trying to find more ways and really produce greater freedom for everyone around him. He was exiled from Uruguay. He was living in Argentina at times. He had to leave the continent and live in Spain for nearly a decade. And so in the aftermath of Franco's death. And so he was able to very much live the life that he's trying to produce on these pages. But it is absolutely extraordinary. Historical persons occur. So, for example, we have a section from 1519 in Tenochtitlan. Dumbfounded by the beauty of it, the conquistadors ride down the causeway. Tenochtitlan seems to have been torn from the pages of Amadis. Things never heard, never seen, nor even dreamed. The sun rises behind the volcanoes, enters the lake, and breaks the floating mist into shreds. The city, streets, canals, high-towered temples glitters before them. A multitude comes out to greet the invaders, silent and unhurried, while innumerable canoes open furrows in the cobalt waters. Moctezuma arrives on a litter, seated on a soft jaguar skin, beneath a canopy of gold, pearls, and green feathers. The lords of the kingdom go ahead sweeping the ground he will tread. He welcomes the god Quetzalcoatl. Thou hast come to occupy thy throne, he says. Thou hast come amid clouds, amid mists. I am not seeing thee in dreams. I am not dreaming. Unto thy land thou hast come. And that section is italicized because that becomes something that is actually from a single primary source that Galeano has been able to source. And he notes then Quetzalcoatl is a native of Estremadura who landed on American shores with his whole wardrobe on his back and a few coins in his purse. He was 19 when he set foot on the wharf at Santo Domingo and asked, "Where is the gold?" He is now 34 and a captain of great daring. He wears armor of black iron and leads an army of horsemen, lancers, crossbowmen, riflemen, and fierce dogs. He has promised his soldiers, "I will make you in a very short time the richest men of all who ever came to the Indies." Emperor Moctezuma, who opens the gates of Tenochtitlan, will soon be finished. In a short while, his own people will stone him to death. Young Quetzalcoatl will take his place. He will fight. And so we have people we've known from the histories that have been written. We see Moctezuma, we see Cortez. And we have the mention of Moctezuma's son, who almost no one can identify by name, Cuauhtemoc, who will lead a longer resistance, who will not be duped, and who will fight to the end. And we see that repeatedly, that we see the explorers, the conquistadors, whose names are so familiar to many. There are secondary schools where I live named after these individuals. And Galeano is more than willing to identify who are these people, what did they do, how did they treat other people, and he's pulls no punches. He says it in the outline. The goal here is to give a voice to the voiceless, and that's what he's working towards. And over and over, we have these moments that reveal the beauty, the natural beauty, the cultural beauty that existed in all of these places, and how that beauty was appreciated for one moment as before it was then plundered. We see individuals who lead a resistance, and we see historically, we know what has happened to those individuals. We know who won these various wars, these various conquests. And so there is a real pathos to much of what we see, and yet Galeano, with his writing, is very much he's picked a side, and he's trying to again revise what we've thought about in our histories. But there are other characters who have popped up in culture and that some folks might be aware of. So in 1561, the first independence of America, they crowned him yesterday. Curious monkeys trooped up among the trees. Fernando de Guzman's mouth dripped guanabana juice, and there were suns in his eyes. One after the other, the soldiers knelt down before the throne of sticks and straw, kissed the hand of the elect, and swore fealty. Then they signed the declaration with a name or an X, all who were not women or servants or Indians or blacks. The scribe made it official, and independence was proclaimed. The seekers of El Dorado, lost in mid-jungle, now have their own monarch. Nothing binds them to Spain except resentment. They have repudiated vassalage to the king across the sea. I don't know him, cried Lope de Aguirre yesterday, all bone and fury, raising his sword covered with mildew. I don't know him or want to know him, nor to have him, nor obey him. And that's final section. And they will sail the Amazon, emerge into the ocean, occupy Margarita Island, invade Venezuela and Panama. Those who sleep dream of the silver of Potosi. Aguirre, who never closes his remaining eye, sees it awake. And that is Aguirre, who famously, Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski created the film Aguirre, Wrath of God, depicting his singular descent into madness, there seeking El Dorado, and what happened with everyone who was with him. And it's a film from the 1970s, about 50 years old, I believe, exactly. And so there are all of these voices gathering everywhere around the book. Last night they were married before the fire as tradition demands, and heard the sacred words. To her, when he ignites with the fire of love, do not be icy. And to him, when she ignites with the fire of love, do not be icy. By the glow of the fire they awaken, embrace, congratulate themselves with their eyes, and tell their dreams. During sleep, the soul travels outside the body and gets to know, in an eternity or the blink of an eye, what is going to happen. Beautiful dreams are to be shared, and to share them, couples awaken very early. Bad dreams, however, are to be thrown to the dogs. Bad dreams, nightmares about abysses or vultures or monsters may portend the worst. And the worst here is being forced to go to the Huancavelica mercury mines or to the far-off silver mountain of Potosi. Immediately after that, the Ballad of Cusco. A llama wished to have her golden hair brilliant as the sun, strong as love, and soft as the mist that the dawn dissolves, to weave a braid on which to mark, knot by knot, the moons that pass, the flowers that die. And across the course of the book, there are so many people who have been historical footnotes that Galeano has deeply researched to try and really paint the full picture, to truly fill in gaps of the historical picture and create this mosaic in a very effective way. Writers who are from that time, of course, appear. So we have Bernal Diaz, we have Fra Bartolomeo de Diaz, who wrote a very short book, very clearly identifying to the church officials, this is the horror that is happening here. This is the actual genocide that is occurring. This is how people that humans who we've now identified have souls. This is how they're being treated here. And of course, it's just, and Galeano notes, he writes that and he sees what's happening and he's willing to write it and send it back, and it's utterly ignored. He notes that so much of the gold that was, stolen and plundered from the American continents was used to just finance wars in Europe. And Galeano, again, is drawing sides, but he is doing it with a real purpose and with a clear eye of what has actually happened and what is the legacy of those depredations. Because the book doesn't just end in 1700 here in Genesis, it continues on. There's a Memory of Fire trilogy. So there's a second volume, Faces and Masks, that goes from roughly 1700 to 1900. And then it closes with a volume, Century of the Wind, in which he's focusing just on the 20th century. And he's saying, okay, it started here. Here's who individuals were before this collision. Then there's 200, the hundreds of years of the conquistador plunder. Then we have this new century. Okay, what's been happening here? There have been revolutions. There's been liberation and freedom in different ways, sometimes before the 20th century, sometimes during the 20th century. But what has that meant now for the people who are living here, for my neighbors? And so it really is a trilogy that I'm looking forward to continuing, because in so many ways it is a work that, as I said, fills in gaps. It fills in gaps of my own reading, the history I've learned, the people, the students I teach, the families I work with, my neighbors. There's one last historical personage that I want to mention in detail. So he has a single section on Shakespeare. He has a single section on Miguel de Cervantes. So writers, and sort of what they've heard about this new world and how they try to perceive it. But he mentions Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. In ships, the bells mark off the quarter hours of the watches. In mines and cane fields, it summons Indian serfs and black slaves to work. In churches, it marks the hours and announces masses, deaths, and fiestas. But in the tower over the palace of the Viceroy of Mexico, there is a silent bell. It is said that inquisitors took it from the bell tower of an old Spanish village, removed the clapper, and expatriated it to the Indies no one knows how many years back. Ever since the Maestro Rodrigo constructed it in 1530, this bell has always been clean and obedient. They say it had 300 tones, according to the bell ringer's whim, and the whole village was proud of it, until one night, its long and violent pealing made everybody jump out of bed. The bell was sounding the alarm, unleashed by fear or joy or who knows what, and for the first time no one understood it. A crowd gathered in the atrium as the bell pealed madly on, and the mayor and the priest went up to the tower and, frozen with fear, confirmed that no one was there. No human hand moved it. The authorities took the case to the Inquisition. The Holy Office Tribunal declared the pealing of the bell to be totally null and void, and it was silenced forever and exiled to Mexico. Juana Inés de Abase walks out of the palace of her protector, the Viceroy Mancera, and crosses the great plaza, followed by two Indians who carry her trunks. Reaching the corner, she stops and looks back at the tower, as if called by the voiceless bell. She knows its history. She knows that it was punished for singing all on its own. Juana heads for the Santa Teresa la Antigua convent. She will no longer be a lady of the court. In the serene light of the cloister and the solitude of a cell, she will seek what she cannot find outside. She would have liked to study the mysteries of the world at the university, but women are born condemned to the embroidery frame and the husband chosen for them. And so we have an incredible poet and a fierce essayist. Sor Juana was, I did a video on her about 2 years ago, and she was a writer who absolutely could think through arguments about as skillfully as anyone I've ever found, and would respond to questions about why should women be educated, why should women learn to read, and was very articulate in her responses. And so here we have this cultural connection where she has popped up in numerous sections, the way that someone like Pizarro or Cortez or Moctezuma or Atahualpa did across earlier sections of the book. She is now here, and this is maybe the third or fourth time we've seen her have a page or a paragraph. And we see this moment when she realizes that she will not be allowed to study at the university. She'll not be allowed to do everything she wanted, even though she has this sort of privileged life as a noble, as someone who is the descendant of the Spanish, governing rulers there in Mexico. But she will find a way to still write, find a way to maintain her voice and the kinship she has with that bell that was, pealing of its own accord, as she herself has been. And so this is a book I cannot recommend highly enough. I had truly never heard of this writer, and yet I think this accomplishment is absolutely stunning. It calls to mind the deep praise that, of course, has gone for William T. Vollmann and his Seven Dreams trilogy. And I would say a key difference is the Seven Dreams by Vollmann are much closer to novels. Yes, they're filled with historical personages. They're deeply sourced, just as Galeano is. But he's more interested in writing novels that illuminate these themes, whereas Galeano, I think, was more interested in the historical side and used this form that was close to a novel to try and draw that out. The books of Jacob from Olga Tokarczuk comes to mind, as I mentioned, John dos Passos and his writings. But this is extraordinary. I look forward to continuing this work. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in that part of history, please explore this. Thank you.